So good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to this LIR HEAnet User Group for Library seminar on persistent identifiers, or PIDs. My name is Jenny O'Neill, and I'm a Research Engagement Officer with HEAnet. So as both a HEAnet staff member and a member of LIR and a librarian, I'm absolutely delighted to be chairing this seminar this afternoon on behalf of the LIR committee. Any of you who were at the Connell conference last week will have heard Tony Aga talking about the importance of preserving ebooks. In his keynote, he described librarians as trustworthy guardians and stewards of knowledge. And in relation to ebooks, he talked about having a master copy, which would represent a legitimate point of access, guaranteeing access by tomorrow's researchers to today's knowledge. As a member of the North PID task force, this got me thinking about the key role that PIDs really do play in ensuring this trust in a legitimate master copy of any work. So today we're going to hear 3 different talks, all touching in one way or the other a little bit on the use of PIDs in academic libraries. We're going to start with an introduction to the National PID Roadmap from Dr. Lisa Griffith, who is chair of the North PID Strategy Working Group. Then we're going to hear a little bit about PIDs in the context of the National Open Access Monitor Project, and that talk is going to be by Aaron Binchy, who's the interim project manager for the National Open Access Monitor Project. And then finally, we will hear from Frances Madden, who's the Assistant Head of Library Services at TU Dublin, about TUNet and the OS Trails project. So each speaker is going to speak for about 20 minutes or so. We'll have time for questions and answers after each of the talks. If you want to pop your questions into the Q&A section or into the chat, I'll try and keep an eye on both of those. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lisa.
Hi, thanks so much, Jenny. I'm really delighted to be talking to you this afternoon. So my name is Lisa Griffith, and I am Director of the Digital Repository of Ireland. The DRI is the coordinating body for the National Open Research Forum. I'm just going to share my slides to start off. Now. Okay. So the DRI, thanks, Jenny. The DRI is the coordinating body for the National Open Research Forum. And I'm delighted to be speaking to you today with my North hat on. And the new National Open Research Coordinator will take up her position on the 1st of July, and that's Michelle Doran. So I'm here in an interim position, but it's really lovely to be talking to everyone about something that we've been working on for 6 months, which is PIDs and developing a national PID roadmap for Ireland. So why do we need to be thinking about open research? So open research, as outlined in the National Action Plan for Open Research, requires collective action. The transition to a national open research environment is a shared responsibility across the research system, with local efforts required to implement policies, infrastructure, and incentives within research performing and research funding organisations. And I know that anyone who was at Connell last week would have heard an awful lot about North, about open research, and about why it is important to the wider library ecosystem. PIDs in particular are very important to the infrastructure itself and to the National Action Plan. So the National Action Plan has 3 themes to it. And those 3 themes are establishing a culture of open research, so focusing on culture and kind of shifting our own mindset. The second theme is achieving 100% open access to research publications. And then the third theme is enabling fair research data and other outputs. And PIDs actually cut across all 3 of those themes, and they're hugely important to it. And one of the nice things about the action plan, which is operational between 2022 and 2030, is that it gives us really clear ways to achieve and to kind of make huge progress on the 3 themes of changing our culture towards open research, achieving 100% open access to research outputs, and enabling fair or research data to be fair. And they kind of, the action plan tells us very clearly what we need to be doing, what projects we need to be supporting, and what the way forward is. And a really key part of the action plan is actually building up our infrastructure and building up our supports for infrastructure. And this is where PIDs come in. So PIDs, or persistent identifiers, are foundational elements of research infrastructure. So all of us, I'm sure, are familiar with ORCID IDs for researchers, which are a really good example of PIDs. But at DRI, the PID that we would use most often are the DOIs that are minted for each of the individual objects that we have in our repository. So a PID is a unique label, so a code or a number, but also a long-lasting or a persistent link to either an entity, like an item in a repository, but it really is a person, a place, or a thing. And then the additional metadata about that entity. So for the example of a researcher, it is the researcher name, their institutions, and their publications. So PIDs enable reliable connections between each of these entities. So it's about ORCID IDs talking to the publication outputs and linking them all together. And they allow the research process to be more efficient and transparent. And as I've said there, widely used PIDs include DOIs for research outputs and ORCID IDs for researchers. And I'm sure everyone here is really familiar with those. So why do we need a national PID strategy if we're already using things like ORCID IDs and we're thinking about DOIs within our infrastructure? Well, the action plan has actually identified that there's a lot more progress that we need to be making with PIDs and how we need to be thinking about supporting them, encouraging their use, and implementing them in all different kind of stages of the research life cycle, from research grants, giving each of them an individual PID, to the researcher and the research outputs. And the strategy identifies them, I guess, in 2 particular areas. So support the Irish ORCID Consortium and encourage further development and adoption of ORCID. And IRL are the body that are leading that. So we're really lucky to have them bringing that forward. But then the second item around persistent identifiers that are in the action plan is to develop a national roadmap for the adoption of a range of persistent identifiers, such as ORCIDs, DOIs, RAIDs, and RORs. So there's 2 additional ones there that you might not yet be too familiar with. RORs are organizational PIDs, and RAIDs are an Australian type of PID, or it's been kind of brought forward in Australia, and that would be to group together a wide range of PIDs together to think about maybe a project that was funded with the researchers involved in it, and then the research outputs. So there's a lot of progress and developments within the PID landscape as well. So when we sat down to think about how we would develop a national PID strategy, how we would think about increasing the uptake and increasing the kinds of supports that Irish institutions need for PIDs, we began to think about each of the different elements involved in a strategy, and we at North put out a call for this strategy to be written externally, recognizing that we didn't have the expertise. So the company who came on board to help draft that strategy is a company called More Brains. And I'm going to be talking about More Brains Cooperative throughout my presentation. And what we asked them to do were 2 things, really. So we asked them to produce a cost benefit analysis for adoption in Ireland that said, if we, like, what are the benefits to adopting PIDs and will they save us money if we do? And then there was the national PID strategy itself, and the cost benefit analysis has been launched, and I'll kind of touch on that a little bit later, but it highlights the benefits in time and resources, and so funding to the increased uptake of PIDs in the research landscape. So the people who are supporting this project are More Brains Cooperative. So they have helped other countries to produce national strategies, including Australia, Canada, the UK, and they are very embedded in the kind of global information and developments about PIDs. So we were really lucky to get them on board to be producing the strategy and helping to advise us. But I guess being very involved in the global picture means that they needed a lot of support locally. And that support came from North and the PID task force, who are national people advising on what the picture looks like in Ireland and the different elements of what we need. And then they have a lot of Irish research stakeholders. The project started in October and it's due to finish in July. So I'm delighted to say we're at the end of it and we're looking now at completing all of our outputs. And they were kind of very focused on the research element of this being inclusive, evidence-based and transparent. So there's two elements to it. As I said, there's the cost benefit analysis, and that was published in April, and it was called Efficiency and Insight. And what it's really driving at is using a methodology similar to international methodologies that they've used to look at what are the savings that researchers and research managers can make if they begin to use PIDs. So if they're beginning to use something like an ORCID ID that has all of the publications a researcher has already keyed in to kind of share information about that researcher on grant applications, for example. Or what if they begin to use persistent identifiers for other types of research information, and it benefits researchers because it means they don't have to continue to key in this evidence every single time they apply for a grant or every single time they create a new profile, for instance, on a university research support system, as one example. So the methodology they applied were based on the adoption of 4 priority PIDs, Crossref and DataCite, as outputs for grants, ORCID IDs for individual researchers, RAIDs and RORs. And what they said is that if there is a central support unit, so if DFERIS invest in a central support unit that is staffed by people who can talk about embedding PIDs in the infrastructure and encouraging a greater uptake across researchers, what will the savings be? So you have to spend a little bit to kind of make these huge savings. And they looked at this on a 5-year basis, and they found that there was a huge amount to be saved, that across 5 years, over 4,000 days of staff time, researchers, research administrators, and funding agencies can save a huge amount of time that can be put back into time spent in research, and that it's the equivalent of nearly 1.8 million euro at the end of those 5 years. So the cost benefit analysis, I'll actually drop the link for this in the chat at the end of my presentation. It is accessible now, and you can go in and you can read it. It was super interesting to work on because given their global perspective, one of the things they were looking at was the extent of Irish research across the landscape. And they found that the percentage of co-authors in Ireland was, authors or Irish researchers who were working as co-authors with people internationally was very, very high. And this is something that was comparative to other heavily funded organizations. And they were really surprised at this, at the level of kind of global interaction that Irish researchers are involved in. And this would place the need to be thinking about PIDs really on a higher scale, because we want to be keeping pace with our global partners in the US or Australia or Europe, for example. And we want to make sure that our research is as accessible as those global partners. So the second element to the PID strategy is the strategy itself. So there's a cost benefit analysis to say that we need to invest in actually the uptake of PIDs, and it talks about how we can do that. And then the second element is, how do we actually get them embedded? How do we get more people using them? What do we need to do specifically in Ireland to ensure PIDs are a success? And this is going to be launched at the end of June. We're actually looking at the final recommendations at the moment, and it's been really interesting to look at what specifically we need to do in Ireland. And we're at a really interesting point as well with the creation of Research Ireland, and there's a really fantastic opportunity to kind of encourage researchers and funding bodies to be taking up PIDs. So the roadmap itself was put together by stakeholder consultations. And the first part of that really was to look at what the current level of engagement with PIDs is. And some of you may have been involved in a community-wide survey to do that. And then they looked at different kinds of opportunities in each of the PID areas. There was a strategic SWOT analysis where they looked at kind of opportunities and benefits and things that we needed to work on. And then there's the final report that will be published at the end of June. And it's actually going to be launched online, and I have details for that. We haven't announced it properly yet, but Natasha Simons, who is responsible for leading the Australian National PID strategy, is going to be launching that. And she has some really interesting things to say about next steps for PIDs and kind of getting that embedded. So I'm looking forward to that. So just to say again that this is something that is kind of a broad community effort. And so I wanted to make sure that we listed all of our task force members. So my former colleague, Ashton Conway, was kind of a key person involved in this. And then we had kind of key stakeholders represented on the PID task force, including Jenny. We had Deirdre Quinn at the HEA, Susan Riley, Francis, who's here, of course, as well. Killian Joy, Catherine Ferris, who Aaron, I know, is acting interim project manager at the moment. So it's been really good actually to hear from all those different elements across the landscape. But we've also really had a lot of community consultations, and I think that's really been key to hearing from different elements of the community, and then people who are outside the community and wondering, well, why are they outside, and is this important to us? So what have we done so far now that we're kind of staring at the beginning of June? I'm starting to panic because we had a very long list of things to do. So the PID task force was established in November, just after we had after more brains had come on board to actually draft the strategy. We had a community survey across November and December to look at that kind of PID engagement across the community. They produced an engagement plan in February, and that was saying, here are the kind of key stakeholders you need to go out and talk to. You need to remind them why PIDs are important, and thinking about all the different ways that we need to be putting this on people's agenda. One of the outputs of that we're going to be launching shortly, and they are short briefing documents that they're like small little elevator pitches to say, okay, you're a research manager, why are PIDs important to you? And maybe that's something I can send to Jenny to circulate to this group afterwards, because it's a really useful way for you to be thinking about PIDs and then for you to be making that pitch to other people to think about them. So in March, we completed our cost benefit analysis, and that was launched in April. And that's talking about, well, we need some investment to kind of get the very best value. This is a really good opportunity for the research landscape, and how do we make that a success? And then we started back with community consultations for the strategy itself, and they were very kind of key targeted focus groups. So we went and talked to funders, and we talked to organizational leaders, and we kind of got their input at various levels. So we've been running community engagement events since then. did our SWOT analysis, and then kind of upcoming is our draft report, which will be produced our full report will be produced in late June. And then the project is over, but we will be looking to the future, to thinking about how can we actually action everything that the strategy recommends. So I'd love to say the project's done, but actually really it's the beginning. So I just wanted to kind of touch as well on the fact, I know I've mentioned this a little bit, but how much we have sought to include the community in drafting this strategy. And while More Brains are kind of a global organization, they've worked with lots of different countries. One of the things that really impressed me is how much they wanted to take on board what's happening in the local community, because they understand it's not one size fits all. And I'm looking at kind of the draft recommendations at the moment, and they really have honed in on what's happening right now in the Irish landscape, and thinking about how PIDs will help that and how we need to position these. So that's been really interesting. So we have done our community consultations. We've also been doing kind of broadcast outreach and thinking about strategic relationships. So thinking about who we need to talk to get these on board. They've had lots of kind of data gathering, and the outputs are available, and I will share this CBA once this is done as well. I mean, really, our vision for this is the widespread adoption and integration of PIDs, but the aim is that it's going to improve. Now it says there, productivity and satisfaction. It makes it sound like researchers are on a conveyor belt. The idea, though, is that this is going to make life easier for researchers and research data managers, because we know that they are coming down with a huge amount of bureaucracy. How can we lift that from them to make sure that they can do more research and that you can support research in a better way? We also see it as kind of, you know, as I said, key to the National Action Plan, and those 3 themes of establishing a culture of open research, making it easy for researchers, realizing that they have a lot of administrative burdens, providing 100% open access to research publications, and enabling fair data, which is something that's so important to us at DRI as well. We're always talking about fair. And then it will make it easier to track the impact of Irish research. And I know that's hugely important for institutional leaders as well. So I'm going to wrap up now. I can see Jenny's looking a bit nervous. I don't want to go over time, but just to say that we do have 2 upcoming community events that you might be interested in. So More Brains Cooperative are actually going to dig into how they produce the strategies. So working with them has been really interesting to see kind of their methodologies for getting results, and how they're applying that and how they're coming up with their strategy. And that's actually this week on Thursday, the 6th of June, in case you're PID hungry and want to hear more about PIDs this week. And then the launch itself will be the 25th of June. And we'll have Natasha Simons from Australia over to talk about their kind of experience of next steps in Australia, but also to talk about the Irish PID strategy and its implementation. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to hand you back to Jenny.
Thanks, Lisa. That was fantastic. I don't see any questions yet. We do have a few minutes for questions, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A box. And I'll be able to put those to Lisa. But Lisa, I'm just wondering, and this is as somebody who's been involved with the PID task force, have you had any feedback yet on the cost benefit analysis, kind of broadly speaking?
No, but I am speaking next week at PIDfest in Prague. I won't be able to go there myself, unfortunately, but I will be speaking online actually at a panel of national strategies. So there are a lot of European countries who are either at the beginning of developing their national strategy or further in. What we're specifically focused on, I'm like, I have to write this paper, but anyway, we're going to look at kind of the global reach of Irish researchers and the benefits that PIDs can provide to that. So I'm looking forward to actually hearing what's going on with other national groups. And a key part of this is actually going to be reaching out to some of the government groups who were involved in Impact 2030 to remind them at an infrastructural level why we need to be investing in this. And I think, you know, and again, it's been really interesting. I'm sure you found the same, Jenny, working on the cost benefit analysis to think about, well, like, how do you say, what is the financial benefit to this? And it's just so clear. And it is actually, it feels like this, you know, finally we can point to some real solutions for researchers who are coming down with that kind of administrative burden, and it will take time, but, you know, there's some help coming, and we are thinking of kind of technical solutions to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't see any other questions yet. We can always come back to them. I'm sure Lisa wouldn't mind hanging on, and she'll be here for the rest of the webinar. So we will now hand over to Aaron Binchy. Aaron is the interim project manager at the National Open Access Monitor project, and we'll be talking about that project. So Aaron, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Just bear with me, I'll get my presentation. Hopefully you can see that. I should mention at this stage that I'm the interim project manager for the National Open Access Monitor. My colleague, Dr. Catherine Ferris, was the original PM, and she put in much of the work in getting it to where it is today. Unfortunately, Catherine is currently on leave, as she is much better qualified than I am to speak on this subject. Just to give you a quick overview of the monitor. The project began in November 2022 and will run until November 2024. It is funded by North's Open Research Fund through the HEA. I won't go into too much detail on the background, but in brief, the need for the National Open Access Monitor was identified in reports published by North. The Open Research Landscape Report in 2021, the North Policy Brief Series in 2021 also specifically highlighted the need for a National Open Access Monitor, as did the National Action Plan for Open Research in 2022. The plan outlined some key objectives for the project, which were to arrive at a community-agreed definition for open access, the development of a monitor for open access at a national level, initially creating pilot reports and creating a national dashboard. Critically, for the purpose of transparency, the monitor must use open data. And essentially, the monitor's ongoing work to improve the quality and depth of the data it uses. In late 2022, North Open Research Fund invited tenders for 6 key projects to advance open research in Ireland. One of which was the National Open Access Monitor, and IRL was successful in becoming its project lead. And then the real work began in developing the monitor. As mentioned, Catherine spent countless hours consulting with stakeholders and putting the foundations of the monitor in place. An advisory group was quickly appointed. Requirements for the monitor were identified and defined. An extensive survey was conducted, providing clarity on organizational identity. Crucially, a tender was awarded to OpenAir to build the monitor. OpenAir specialized in developing open access infrastructure for the research sector. To date, the Monitor has published a number of reports: the Inception Report, the Draft National Open Access Monitor Report, and this year, the final National Open Access Monitor Report. We've also delivered the Monitor itself, which is still in pilot phase. Work continues in reviewing the Monitor, looking at how it can be enhanced and improved. We're also working with a number of organizations, both research producing organizations and research funding organizations participating in the Monitor, and encouraging them to become more actively involved and register as dashboard managers who can review data associated with their organizations. Later this year, planning for the Monitor's post-project future will be put in place. The Monitor depends on the input and commitment from all stakeholders. Our IRL project manages it, but it relies on the expertise from OpenAIR to develop it, the recommendations from the advisory group to give the project direction and keep it on track, and input from all stakeholder organizations. It's essential for quality checking and providing vital feedback. PIDs play a vital role in every aspect of the National Open Access Monitor, its design right through to its reporting outputs. The Monitor was designed using FAIR principles. FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. They are design guides for data management which enhance usability and access. They've been adapted to apply to scholarly publications, and in this case to the Monitor. PIDs are key elements for 3 of these principles. PIDs such as DOIs are crucial to make scholarly articles findable, as they provide a unique and persistent reference to digital objects, making them easier to find. PIDs contribute to interoperability to help link data across platforms and databases, facilitating the integration of data for analysis and use. ORCID IDs associated with publications increase their reusability. These IDs unambiguously link researchers to their work, aiding in attribution and ensuring that the right contributors get credit for their work. I'll speak a little more about the importance of ORCID IDs, which are unique identifiers assigned to each individual researchers and play a crucial role in distinguishing their work amidst the ever-expanding volume of scholarly publications. They are vital for several reasons: to resolve issues of name ambiguity, ensuring accurate attribution of work. They also facilitate seamless linkage and tracking of an individual's research outputs across various platforms and affiliations over time. The monitoring report has shown the increasing trend in the use of ORCID IDs amongst the research community. Starting from a usage rate of 51% in 2007, there's a notable increase to 72% in 2020, with a slight dip to 65% in 2022. This growth highlights a shift towards more efficient scholarly communication, with researchers increasingly managing their digital identity to secure proper recognition and visibility for their work. As Lisa mentioned earlier, IRL also manages the National ORCID Consortium. The consortium tracks ORCID integration in Ireland, and this can be viewed on the consortium webpage. And I have a link to that at the end of my presentation. I will next try to explain how the Monitor uses PIDs. Please bear with me, as I'm going to read directly from the report. To achieve accurate and comprehensive monitoring of Irish scholarly publications, we place emphasis on the use of persistent identifiers. PIDs serve as essential building blocks, allowing us to uniquely identify these publications, facilitating discoverability, accessibility, and reusability of research outputs. To monitor specifically defines an Irish scholarly publication as one that contains a persistent identifier associated with an Irish organisation. These PIDs can be found in various places within the publication's metadata, PID metadata, or even within the publication itself. We seamlessly integrate a range of PIDs for both research outputs and organizations. This comprehensive approach guarantees not only the widest possible coverage, but also maintains the integrity and consistency of the data. This table taken from the report shows the variety of PIDs which are used for publications, organizations, and authors, along with the corresponding number of publications associated with PID type. As mentioned earlier, work continues on improving the quality of data in the monitor. OpenAIR are working with organizations to do this. They've recently introduced OpenOrgs, a user-friendly tool to assist deduplicating organization names and to disambiguate parent-child relationships for each organization. Finally, I'd like to mention the cost-benefit analysis, which was done by More Brains on behalf of North, and Lisa mentioned that earlier. And I'd like to particularly refer to an article which one of its authors, Phil Jones, wrote in Scholarly Kitchen recently, which is a good, concise overview of the analysis. He notes that improving the flow of information between stakeholders is not a straightforward task, but doing so will make information about the connections between policy, funding, researchers, and research activities interoperable and reusable in ways that they just currently are not. He emphasizes that collective action is needed to drive advances that will benefit all stakeholders. This need to act collectively is the motivating factor behind a number of national open research strategies and national PID strategies currently being developed, including those in Ireland. The analysis points to significant savings resulting from widespread PID implementation and adoption. It will also alleviate the current crushing bureaucratic burden on researchers, which the report estimates adds up to 4,000 person days annually and is valued at nearly 1.8 million per year. It makes the case that this is more than enough money to pay for integrating the 4 priority PIDs, DOIs, ORCID, RAID, and ROAR at all universities across Ireland, and also to provide technical and educational support for them. The final analysis shows that break-even on investment will be achieved within 3 years, and it would have a net financial benefit to the country of just over 1.6 million after 5 years. So on this relatively positive point, that for some short-term pain in implementing our PID strategy, there are significant benefits to come. And at this point, now I'll hand you back to Jenny.
Thanks, Darren. I think you've really demonstrated in a really practical way the benefits that we can have by implementing all of these different PIDs. I think the value in being able to uniquely identify researchers and link them to their outputs, I think we can all recognize that. But once we then have the ROARs for institutions and the RAIDs for projects, I think the power of all of that is just going to be fantastic. So institutions will be able to track the outputs from all of their researchers. They will be, and then projects, individual projects, even like SFI research centres, then will be able to uniquely track all of the research outputs from their projects as well. I think the power of it is incredibly powerful. We do have time for questions, so if there are any other questions, people can pop them into the chat or put them into the Q&A. I see a question for Lisa, but I might keep that to the end then, rather than putting Lisa on the spot again here. So if there are any questions for Aaron, please do let me know. And Aaron, I have a question about the dashboard managers. How have you found the uptake to be so far in terms of institutions identifying a dashboard manager for them?
Yeah, initially we had good uptake, particularly from the universities and TUs and education institutions. It's been a challenge disambiguating the different health, the hospitals and health organizations, but we're working with them now, with the health board. So, but yeah, it certainly is a challenge. But
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, ourselves and Open Air are continuing to work on that and we're getting more and more people on board.
So I have a question from Celie. So PIDs, ORCID, ROAR, etc., and research integrity. Can the OA monitor see or track any activity or research on PIDs and paper mills, plagiarisms, sharp practice in scholarly publications? Is that something that you can answer?
It's not something that the monitor does. It's not. That's really where the dashboard managers need to come in and assist with the quality of the data that we're collecting. But the monitor is only as good as the data that goes into it.
Yeah, and I think that's where the PIDs really, as you've said, are the kind of the key to the quality of the data. So there is another question from, so I actually can't see who it's from, who says, hi there, if an organization wishes to generate a DOI for research outputs, what is the best way to do that? Now, I can answer that if you don't want to, Aaron, but if you
I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. So the best way to get a DOI for any research output is to put it into an archive or a repository. So once you upload it, most archives and repositories, whether that's an institutional repository, whether that's a discipline-specific repository or a generalist repository, will generally mint the DOI on your behalf. So the idea is that you are committing to making those data or that research output as open as possible. And then you get a DOI so that you can track citations of the output, whether that's research data or a publication. So hopefully that has answered your question. I don't see any other questions right now. So what we can do is thank you very much, Aaron, and we'll move on to Frances. So Frances Madden is the Assistant Head of Library Services, of Research Services within TU Dublin, and is going to talk to us about the OS Trails project. Over to you, Frances. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jenny, and hi, everyone. Great to be here today. I presented at this event last year, so it's really nice to be asked back again. And you know, it's always good. Let me just, there we go. So thanks for the thumbs up as well, Jenny. It's good to know. Great. So yeah, as Jenny said, I'll be talking to you about the TUNet initiative, Argus and OS Trails. So sort of three different things that are kind of all connected together. And I will also be tying in the use of PIDs in there as well, because as Lisa mentioned, I'm also a member of the North PID Task Force. So I've been involved in that work as well. But just to give a quick overview about what TUNet is, it's a grassroots alliance of the 5 technological universities in Ireland aimed at developing open research services and infrastructure. So it was initiated in the summer of 2022 following some more informal meetings. And the idea is that as the, with our establishment as technological universities, the TUs have been tasked with becoming more research intensive. And, you can see on the slide there that, that's already been happening, since over the past 5 years or so. But we want to deliver an increase in services and support to support that. So we have an ambition that all staff and students in Irish technological universities have the skills and knowledge to perform their research to the highest level of research excellence and have access to appropriate expertise to support their endeavours, ensuring that excellence in open research is a reality. So that's what we're trying to do. Just to give a quick overview of some of the things we've done to date. So we published an open research statement that was endorsed by all 5 presidents back last September. We also developed a shared repository based on the LIR HEAnet platform, which ties in, so it provides a sort of dashboard where you can search all of the 5 TU's repositories sort of in one place, and they're sort of all indexed together. We also have designed a logo and held a launch event back last September, and we've also been involved in this OS Trails proposal that's now which is now starting to get going. So, which is based on using the tool Argus, which I'm going to talk about now. So Argus is a data management planning tool. I should also say that for those of you, I think, I know there's a lot of colleagues actually from TUNet here on the call, and I'm guessing also from the resin community. So I think there is going to be some overlap in the slides that were presented about this at the Resin Info Share a couple of weeks ago. And I'd also like to thank my colleague Lindsay Dowling, who's the Open Research Support Unit Lead at TU Dublin, for allowing me to adapt some of her materials as well for this presentation. But just to give you a bit of an overview of Argus, so it's a data management planning tool provided by OpenAir. Anyone can access it at the link on screen there, and and also, because I'm conscious that the audience today might not all be sort of librarians working in the research support area, but I'd just like to clarify as well what we mean by a data management plan. A data management plan is a living document that is generally written by researchers at the outset of their undertaking a piece of research, and the idea is that it's updated during the research process, and it aims to provide the researchers with information about how that research data is going to be created, how it's going to be managed during the lifetime of the project, and how it can be shared and preserved for the long term. So the aim of them is that they can that the information in the data management plan can help researchers reproduce, redistribute, and repurpose research results as well. So these are data management plans as well. They're increasingly mandated by funders, have been for quite some time, and they're also just viewed as being good good research practice in our current research environment as well. So they are very necessary, and it's something that colleagues in libraries often provide support to researchers with writing and developing them. So just a couple of things to know about Argus as a service. So it's provided by OpenAir, which brings numerous benefits in that it's open source and it's compliant with the European Open Science Cloud, or EOSC. Because it's developed by OpenAir as well, it therefore links in with the OpenAir Knowledge Graph, which is some of the technology that the Open Access Monitor is also utilizing as well, because it's also been developed by OpenAir. It's very easy to sort of set up and access. It's a software as a service type of product, and you access it through a web browser. It's configurable as well at the institutional level, so you can configure it with different funder templates or different discipline-specific templates. You can also customize it as well, and you can, with your institutional branding, and you can also get institutional oversight for metrics and policy compliance. So if you were to log in yourselves on the URL that was on a couple of slides back, you won't get that institutional oversight like by logging in at that point, but Argus can be set up as institutional instances, and then you gain that oversight. And they're also shortly rolling out multi-tenancy, which is what we'll be utilizing in the OS Trails project, or in our future implementations of Argus. Another great advantage of the Argus product is that it creates machine actionable data management plans. So what machine actionable data management plans are is that computers can understand what they say. So and can, that the information that's held within the data management plan can be extracted and sort of understood by other types of computer programs or APIs. So you can export your data management plan in a range of outputs, like JSON, which would be a machine readable one, or also a PDF, which is, we're more familiar with and is a more human readable format. It also uses the RDA standard, and there's an API endpoint, so you can link it in with other internal systems, such as a CRIS system, like Pure, or any of the other CRIS systems that are available. So it has a couple of other features to it. So that might be a bit different to some of the other data management planning tools that you may be familiar with, like DMP Online. So the data management plans that are created in Argus can be made public, or they can be kept private as well, and they can also be shared with collaborators too. So whether that's where you've got people in different research institutions or different colleagues in the same institution who are all working together on a proposal for a project, or if they want to share it with colleagues in the library for review, for example, as well. I said I would talk about PIDs, and we do have, this tool does utilize persistent identifiers extensively. So data management plans are assigned DOIs. You can link in with Zenodo, which is a repository service that's also provided by it's another EASC product, and it's a very commonly used data repository. And you can also link in with your institutional repository too. It uses ORCID extensively within the system, and that's also provided as an authentication option for login as well as Zenodo and email too. Very helpfully as well, it allows you to version your plan. So, you can look at different iterations of it, and you can also use sort of previous plans that might have been created as templates for different types of information. So I just took some screenshots here just to sort of show you kind of what it looks like. And so when you first log in, you can either import from a file, which is would have to be a JSON file, or you can use the wizard to create a data management plan, which will take you to this screen. So there's quite a lot of mandatory fields in here, which is very useful for us as librarians, and also for research managers as well, who may want to get that kind of institutional oversight and information about it. There are also different, I mentioned that it was configurable. And as you can see, these are sort of some of the, they call them blueprints, the different templates, and these are some of the ones that are available in the public system, but these can be configured as well in the back end. The thing that's a bit different to some of the other tools that are out there is that the way it works is that you create a project level data management plan. So that could be a research project, or a research project could have multiple data management plans associated with them. So, different work packages, for example, within a project could have different data management plans, but they're, associated with the user account who creates them, and they can have collaborators associated with them. But within your data management plan, you just define what data sets you're going to create. through your research, and that can be done at the outset or later on, and can be updated as time goes on. Recognizing the fact that things can change during the course of a research project. But the really nice feature of this as well is that the data sets can then be added into Argus and published through Argus to Zenodo as well. So it covers the sharing and preservation piece of the kind of research life cycle as well, which is a really nice feature that not many, I don't think any of the other types of data management planning tools offer that. So I suppose this, I suppose I also meant to say as well that, thinking about some of the other, about Aaron's talk earlier, that's looking at sort of research outputs and such as journal articles and things. This is looking at other types of research outputs and providing a mechanism to share those, and also covering off some of the earlier stages of the research life cycle and helping to make like a wider range of research outputs fair as well. So here is an example of a data management plan that's been filled out. So as you can see, we have a data management plan with project level information. Also, the system, I mentioned, it heavily utilizes persistent identifiers. So for example, if you add researchers to your plan, there's a sort of a type along box which queries the ORCID database, and you add in your researchers that way as well. Then you can see up in the top right corner, I've got a little icon in blocking it here, but you can see that there is a DOI assigned to the data management plan, and then they call them descriptions, but these are the data sets that are associated with this plan, and those in turn can be assigned DOIs too. So it really embeds in like persistent identifiers sort of at all levels, and all of this information then can be fed into back out into the into the graph and the research information system, so that it can be harvested by other tools, which takes me to this slide. So this is just to highlight how this tool is sort of embedded into this machine actionable, machine readable information system. And so over here at the start, it integrates in with the OpenAIRE APIs, and you can, at every point you can add in your own. You can export out to Zenodo or another repository as well. You assign licenses to the and these are machine readable licenses as well to any of the data sets that are held in the system too, so that again it augments the reusability and interoperability of the outputs. As I mentioned before, these are all fed into the OpenAIRE research graph, which are then included in OpenAIRE Explore, which is the search interface for OpenAIRE, which some of you may be familiar with. That's it's information from that is in turn included in our TUNet shared repository. But it's accessible there. And then there's also the OpenAIRE Monitor service, which is a kind of, I suppose, a kind of higher level of service that OpenAIRE are offering, which is kind of what's been used in the Irish Open Access Monitor. Now I know the Irish Open Access Monitor is focusing on sort of more other types of research outputs at this stage, but it was designed to be extensible. So ultimately that the information that's held in here could end up in there as well. So this is at least designed with the kind of potential future in mind as well, of it all being just potentially reusable and to be indexed in a variety of tools. It is worth saying, though, that this tool doesn't answer all of the problems that one might wish. It is a bit different to some of the other tools that are out there, and it is probably a bit more complex. In the sense, this idea of having the project and the plan and the data sets associated with it. It's not just a simple web form, which is what a lot of the other types of data management plan tools would be based on. So there's a learning curve associated with that for both kind of library staff, research support staff, and researchers themselves. It is aimed at sort of larger research projects, really. It could be a bit too detailed, for your average PhD student. I know a lot of times people, PhD students start writing their data management plan, in a class sort of environment, and there would be a learning curve associated with this tool to get people up and running with it kind of quickly. This is the last bullet point there. I think that's really a comment from Lindsay, but it's one I would agree with, that DMP Online is probably better for people when they're starting out learning about research data management. But as you said, it's not an either or. But this does have some complexity associated with it that does add benefits as well in terms of the institutional oversight that you get through this tool as well. So the implementation. We're planning to implement this across the 5 technological universities before next June. So we've got a year to get this done, because that's when our work in the OS Trails project starts in earnest. So the idea is we'll utilize their new multi-tenancy functionality. So we'll have a joint instance. We'll have agreed parameters and agreed sort of templates and blueprints and requirements associated with it. But it will be possible to adapt for local instances as well. But we also recognize the fact that if we can come to some common ground on this, that it would be simpler and useful. And so we're the TUNet was included as one of the national pilots in this Horizon Europe funded project called OS Trails. So I'll just give a bit of an overview of that project as a whole. So now just to close. So OS Trails it's an absolutely huge project. I think there's it's either 38 or 40 partners across Europe involved in this. It's the kind of next iteration of the various open air projects that have been going on for many years, sort of developing that infrastructure. It's focusing on planning, tracking, and assessing open science. And it's working on this sort of co-creation basis and kind of iterative design process, which is described on this slide. And the idea is that it's meant to empower fairness. I think that in the bottom left there is a key point. But the idea is that things are developed at a high level, to various tools and services are developed at a high level that can be adopted sort of within different communities, which are the pilots. So again, I'm not expecting people to understand everything in this graph, but the main thing to take away from it is that it sort of all trickles down. So there's going to be work done on Argus, for example, which is on this slide, and within some of these other services as well, all with the view of improving the planning, tracking, and assessing of open science across Europe. And then we'll they're looking at things like evaluating data management plans as well. There's an awful lot of different types of activities within this project, but eventually it will trickle down to these national and thematic pilots. So there are 15 national pilots alone, and so Ireland is one of them. And then there are also 9 thematic pilots, and there's also a Horizon Europe pilot as well. So it really is a massive project. The different pilots are at different stages of maturity and scale as well. So we're relatively small within those pilots, and we're a very small part. The Irish pilot is a very small part of this project as a whole. But what we're aiming to do with the pilot is that we will have the pilot will start from June 2025 and will run for 18 months. It's going to be all about understanding kind of how Argus is being used, training researchers, developing more templates, particularly for the major funders like SFI, and then we have KPIs around the number of researchers trained, the number of templates created, and the number of data sets shared as well. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at as part of this project. So that's it. I'll leave it there, and yeah, very happy to take any questions, and thanks very much for your attention.
So again, any questions can be popped into the Q&A box or into the chat. I can pick them up in either. Francis, I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't realized that it would mint DOIs for the data management plans. Does that mean that the data management plans will only get a DOI if they're public, or are all plans getting a DOI? Do you know?
I was trying to figure that one out actually myself, and I don't have a definitive answer. I think what happens is the DOI was reserved at the point of its creation, and then it would sort of, be moved to a kind of findable state. Think of the data site terminology. If it's made public. That's my understanding.
I mean, research outputs can still be fair and closed, as long as there's information about the research output. So it could even be something like that. I think what's really interesting about the 3 talks that we've heard this morning is that, or this afternoon, I should say, is, Lisa kind of gave us that really good overview, and then looking at 2 different ways in which PIDs are helping with implementations across publications, but then also data sets through Argus as well. So the one question that I do see is actually for Lisa. So that'll give everybody a chance, if there are any questions being typed as I speak, to answer, to get those in. So Lisa, there's a question from Kippy, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I understand the slides presented about the PID project achievements. Perhaps I want to hear from her about PID and intellectual property. So I was wondering if you had anything to add there, Lisa.
Not really. Maybe there's a particular area that the question was focused on. I mean, I think PIDs are hugely important around authenticity of data, and so there's a good opportunity as well once you are sharing any of your own intellectual property to be linking it into that kind of broader network. It's another way to kind of quite quickly get your outputs out there. And establish them with researchers. So I wondered, was there a particular area that they were interested in? But I think PIDs are really crucial to actually trustworthy data. And that is something that's even more important, as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think where PIDs kind of and IP might overlap a little bit is that, from my perspective, data can be fair and not open. So if you have data which are owned by a commercial company, you could still potentially publish the metadata describing those data. So who created it? What institution created it? And then you would bring in your ORCIDs and your VORs and what projects they're associated with. So you can still give the information about the data, even if you are not making the data themselves completely open. So that's where there is the potential to make information about closed IP protected data sets available, using PIDs to link those to the relevant institutions, projects, researchers, and research outputs as well. So I don't see any other questions for the moment. Hopefully somebody is not furiously typing away, because I certainly don't want to miss anybody. I want to say thank you all so much for your attention this afternoon and for coming along. We were absolutely thrilled at the number of people who signed up, demonstrating the interest and appetite I think that there is among academic librarians in this area. And I want to give a particular shout out to Anya Lynch, who is the current LIR committee chair, because she did a huge amount of work in the background to pull this all together, to get the website up and get the registration up and everything as well like that. So on behalf of the LIR committee, I would just like to thank you all again for being here today. Thank our three speakers for your time. And I think the three projects really gave us a really practical view of how PIDs can help within the research landscape. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Goodbye.
Jenny, sorry,
Yes.
there's a question in the chat.
Oh, my apologies, James. I just
Yeah.
spotted it.
Yeah, it's only just come in.
Okay. So it's for Francis actually. Does working on the open air projects also allow for closer collaboration with other European countries? Are many of them at the same stage of development as us?
So as I mentioned, our kind of that project OS Trail kicked off in February this year. But our piece of work in it doesn't really kick off till June next year. So it's quite a long lead in time. But what I suppose it does give you in a sort of reason to interact with users or like colleagues across Europe in a way that you mightn't otherwise. And that is like a very interesting experience. I think there is a huge variation in practice and sort of state maturity. I mean, across Europe. I think also the different partners that are involved. I mean, I think some of the kind of other national pilots, they're being coordinated by sort of an equivalent of HEAnet actually. So, it's very variable across the or sort of national libraries and things like that. There's like it's very variable across the across the project, but in a way that's like a real opportunity and like nice aspect of it as well. But yeah, you definitely I've definitely learned a lot since we've started working on it, and hopefully that will only continue and we'll have more reason for closer collaboration as time goes on.
I think it's also a really great example of institutions working together within Ireland, and that we might be able to see that as potentially a model for how we might collaborate more going forward. So hopefully I haven't missed any other questions. So once again, just thanks very much to our speakers, and thanks to the committee members who were in the background working to pull this all together, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.